everyone, it's Ryan. Welcome back to another live episode. You know what? I'm going to start this over because I actually like the way I did the intro last week, which is thank you so much for joining us here in the Smokin' Studios for another live episode of the Rocky Mountain Cigar Show. Everybody, 4 years. 4 years today is this show has been going on, and I have a very special guest, a guest that was I don't even realize. I don't remember if it was anything that would have stood out to him as an interview. I did ask some pretty good questions. I think. Please go back and check it out. February 26th, 4 years ago. Um, and when I reached out to George to come back on, lo and behold, he remembered actually coming on. So that made me feel good. And then he wanted to be a partner with the show. He liked what the show was doing. He loved the fact that it's been around. How many of these things come up and down and up and down and just completely burn out and fizzle, and this show kind of turned into a thing of its own. From everybody watching, they enjoy the way the setup is done. They enjoy the questions. Hopefully you're enjoying all the new animations and graphics and everything else that have been going on, and moving things back and forth, trying to always just kind of keep the show fresh. And so when I reached out to George and asked him to come on, he certainly jumped at the opportunity. And boy, I tell you, it's an honor to have him back on. It's even a bigger honor as kind of going full circle, right, for the show. The very first guest to ever have on, which, by the way, if for those of you that have been following me from the beginning, you will remember had the nice glow of my bonfire, propane bonfire pit sitting right next to me as I'm sitting here in February in Colorado, smoking an amazing Gran Habano cigar and freezing my ass off. Now I get to have George back on as the show has matured a lot, has gained a very great audience that enjoys the show, and so it's really kind of full circle for me then to turn around and have George offer to be a partner with me on the show. Like, it really made me feel good that he offered to do that. And so, as you all see here, y'all know the rules. When we have a partner of the show on, there is no scrolling banner. It is strictly them. And you can all guess. I'm still going to do the segment of the What Are You Smoking Tonight, of course, segment. But as you could all guess, probably what we're going to be smoking tonight. So thank you all so very much for being a part of this journey for me, for being a part of this show. It has been an amazing time, an amazing journey along the way, and I am so privileged to be able to do this every Thursday night. So enough yibber yapping from me, because I'll be honest, I have much more of a face for radio and a voice for radio. But I tell you what, though, the dapper dad of the night here is coming in. George. George, everyone saw the picture. When he gets dressed up, he looks the bee's knees, let me tell you. So everyone's here clearly to talk to you and to hear what you have to say. But George, thank you so much for coming on tonight. It really truly means a lot. And it meant a lot when I called you a couple months ago to plan this thing out, that you were like, yeah, we'll shift things around to make sure we're part of it. We want to come on. So thank you again. And everybody, this is George Rico. George, go ahead and introduce yourself to everybody, just in case they for some reason don't know
So,
who
hey,
you
they
are.
might not know me. I mean, it happens. But I'm George Rico, owner of Gran Habano Cigars, and tonight's special day. I can't believe it's 4 years. And to be honest, I mean, I do remember the interview really well. And I will be frank. Out of all the interviews that I've done over the years, your questions were really good. And I remember going back and talking to my wife about it. And I was like, I got some really good questions. It wasn't the regular run of the mill kind of like, so tell me about the brand and where you started. Those are great. I think you definitely need an origin story. But at the end of the day, I do remember, and it stuck in my mind that whole time. So
Well,
I'm very happy to be here.
and like I said, I am so privileged, and like it complete full circle, really, for the show, right? You pop the show's live episode cherry.
Nice.
And 4 years later, now we're partnering together on the show. You're supporting it in a way that it means the world to me. But I see what you're smoking, and everybody, of course, sees the banner down below here. So let's go ahead without wasting any time because I've been sitting on this thing. I almost lit one up, and I see you grabbed the exact same one I did.
Yeah. So I
So
sent you a couple of the ones that are gonna. This is actually a PCA release. So you're gonna be able to smoke the PCA release. This is actually the. It's a Corona Gorda, but it's a 7 by 46 Corona Gorda, which is a little longer than your traditional 5 and 5/8, or it's 6 or 5/8, however you want to. So it's a little longer, but we're gonna be handing these out at PCA coming up in April.
okay, yeah, that's what you and you also have this size available too.
Yeah, currently we started shipping the Corojo #7 Gran Robusto, which is a 6 by 54. We are going to release a Robusto size for PCA, but we are doing a sponsorship during PCA where guys get to come in, store owners, participants of PCA, and we're going to be doing one of the sponsorings at Manning's in New Orleans. And if you come over, you will have access to have one of the Coronas that we're smoking tonight. So this is going to be released periodically throughout the course of the year and next year as an add-on to the line, but we're just focusing on two sizes that customers can go out and smoke, which is a 5 by 52 and then our 6 by 54.
Well, I mean, it's an absolutely gorgeous packaging, as everybody can see here. So this is what we're smoking, and again, I'm a sucker for this size. We talked about it.
Yeah.
Um, so this is the "What Are We Smoking Tonight" segment, sponsored by Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust. So I wanted to kind of, and I'm going to stay here for this question because I think it's appropriately asked in the "What Are We Smoking Tonight" segment. We'll kind of transition over here. First off, explain again what it is, wrapper, filler, binder.
All right. So everybody really knows our product as Gran Habano Corona 5. And for a lot of of our fans that don't know, the way we rate our blends on strength is actually based on that number. So we go from 1 to 10, and the higher the number, the stronger the cigar. In essence, our Connecticut #1 is mild, Habano #3 is medium, and then we have our Corona #5, which is a medium to maybe going into the full. I was working on the Corojo #7, which technically originally was a very strong cigar compared to the Corojo #5. But I changed my mind and I wanted to do something a little bit more complex, richer, and that's what this is. So the guys that are out there that know our brand know the strength numbers, but this is a little bit different. And the filler is a Nicaraguan filler. All right, the binder's Nicaraguan, but this is a hybrid wrapper that we are farming. It's taken me 15 years to work on this wrapper that we are farming in a country that we're not telling anybody because it's not a tobacco growing country. So it's a hybrid of the Corojo, but it's a very tasting, very earthy, flavorful wrapper. That I mean, if you see the oils on this, these are just
Oh yeah, no, it's
beautiful.
it's gorgeous. It's a delicate feel. It's a velvety wrapper. I mean, there is let's see here if we can there is like very little to any blemish coming across on this thing. There's very little to any vein feel on it. I mean, it is velvety smooth, really really nicely wrapped. And it's a harder size in my opinion to roll. It's not an impossible size to roll, but the smaller the ring gauge, the harder it is. And so you guys were able to pull it off at this size. And again, I'm a huge fan of this size, this format for a cigar in every way. Um, so thank you so much, Steve Sack, for sponsoring the "What Are We Smoking Tonight" segment. Let's jump in here. So, George, and continuing on with this, one of the things that I know about your brand is the Croho Five. Now you have a lot of great staple core line cigars, as well as a lot of great boutique line cigars where you've kind of boutiqued a certain line of it, right? But I don't think anybody would deny that your number series is really what you're most noted for. So you had 1, 3, 5, 7,
Five Maduro.
5 Maduro, 135, 5 Maduro, and 7. And the 3 is the Habano,
Hmm.
the 5 is the Corojo, and then the 5 Maduro.
Yeah.
And how does that, because that's been a journey for you to come up with the Connecticut, the Habano, the Corojo, and then the Corojo Maduro, and now this. How are you able to keep that core flavor profile across all the numbers? Because you didn't come out with another number from 5 to 7, and it's been
20 years.
yeah, that's a so like so either you have been the most pickiest person in the world, which knowing how you are and who you are and a perfectionist, my guess is I'm going to lean towards that, or it's you've not been able to find what you have felt was an appropriate tobacco in the last 20 years until now. So where does it kind of stand with that?
Well,
Does that make sense?
yeah, it does, and I mean it's a little bit different, really. The reason why we kept the number in our original core lines was for the strength. I did venture off with a lot of the boutiques, the SDK stuff that I got originally came out with the Zulu Zulu, the Opium, all these other blends, and then the Black Dahlia. So those are more the small production boutique side of Gran Habanos, and that's where really I've had an opportunity to play. But when I wanted to go back to the Cora brand, I wanted to really feature something that was special. Originally, when I came out with the brand, the Connecticut, the Habano, and the Corojo Maduro, there wasn't that staple of in a brand within a catalog. Usually, you would have a Connecticut and a Maduro, or a different wrapper. When I came out in the early 2000s, I wanted to really kind of with the brand itself into the market. I wanted to be able to give the consumer options. And it was very simple: three sizes, three wrappers, something that could kind of give the consumer an option within our brand. But introducing a Corolla, and that's one of the things that I haven't done for a long time because I didn't want to. They've been Gran Habano, like the blue and green, and boutique size of Gran Habanos. But ultimately, introducing a core brand was something that I was going to wait to do something really special for. And that's why it's taking me this long, because the wrapper that I wanted to use was this hybrid. It's just a really tough wrapper to grow. Our selection is very, very limited. We're actually only getting about 50 to 100,000 leaves for wrapper a year. So that's what makes this cigar special. And then when I thought of doing a project, I was like, we have the 7, and then I'm slated to do the 9. And then I'm leaving 10 open because 10 should technically, by our way of doing our blends, should be a powerhouse. And something that you could, ultimately it's kind of like that ghost pepper cigar that
Sure.
I'm looking for. So that's where that's gonna be one day. But doing a core brand with the Corojo 7, I really wanted to, take my time, and it's taken me over 20 years. So,
So how do you kind of allow yourself to keep true to that, because to that brand profile? Because if anybody's gonna say, oh my gosh, this is Gran Habano flavor, this is Gran Habano profile, it's 135 Maduro,
mhm.
and then 20 years later you do this. So how are you able to kind of keep into that same um core feel, to where 20 years later with the new tobacco stuff you haven't really played with released, you're able to kind of keep that same core feel?
Well, I mean, in essence, it's what I was talking about. I mean, the continuation of the Corojo, and this is a Corojo 7. Ultimately, at the end of the day, was something that I wanted to keep the consumer focus on, or this is kind of like a not a sequel, but essentially it is, but an extension of what the Corojo 5 is, but in a different light, in a different blend. So the customer that's been smoking our product for this, period of time, could really understand what the direction of this is going, and hopefully that's the case. To answer the part of the question that I didn't answer earlier, the reason why I'm able to keep the flavor profile and the consistency has always been our main goal within my family, my father and I, is that we farm everything close to 90%. And I say close because that 10% is that Connecticut that we don't grow. That
Sure.
most of that is out of Ecuador. But 90% of the tobaccos that go into our cigars, we grow ourselves. So essentially, it allows us to keep the consistency, and we tweak the blend every year if we have to based on the crops. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the customer that smokes our Gran Habano today could really have the same Gran Habano experience that they had 20 years ago. And that's been my ultimate goal this whole time.
Well, I think you've done it. Just in lighting this up, you've done a really good job in staying true to that. Now, for anybody wondering that, are we gonna be like seeing more on this number scale from you? More, are the maybe an 8, a 9, a 10? Like, are we gonna fill the scale? There's gonna be a 6. Is this like a number series for you? That's gonna be like an opus at the end of everything.
Um, so technically, from 1 through 5 is going to be the core brands. The number series that will come out. There is one store in the country that has the number 9. I'm not gonna say which store that is because they're selling it unbanded. I'm trying it to see what they really kind of the response is from it. But there is a Corojo 9 somewhere out there in the country. And so we're doing the 7 now, but the 9 is slated to come out a few years from now. I'm not currently working on any new projects until 26, because I really want to focus on 7. I think, 15 years of working on a project warrants the time for me to give it the time that it needs in the marketplace and
Oh, I
the
agree.
nurturing and the travel. So that's going to come from it. But ultimately, I don't know where I'm going. I will say that I am going to have some limiteds coming out that I've been working on projects. But overall, at the end of the day, the core brand number series will continue to exist, and there will be projects coming forward in the future. But I just don't know when they're going to be released.
Well, I think you've done a great job in the size, the draw of it's really really nice. And in kind of moving on here, what are we to be expected to see from you at microphone fell? What are we expecting to see from you at PCA this year? We're just getting
So
a PCA question out of the way because
yeah, I mean for PCA, it's really kind of we did the limited release on the Corel 7 in those leather, a leather kind of um, case that I wanted to put it in for out there. But then the full line extension kit started to release last week, actually. So customers out there will be able to see the trays that are going to be out at stores where you could buy the Corojo 7. There is the 5-pack series, so that's going to come out with that. It's just one size currently, but then you are going to have the Robusto that I mentioned earlier that's going to be released for PCA. And then ultimately, we're going to sample this size because believe it or not, I blend to a 46 ring gauge. That's
mm-hmm.
what this is. It's a lot harder, but I like the limitation of not having that much filler, and then I can really taste the wrapper and binder when I'm smoking a cigar. So a lot of people do a 50 or 52 or 54. I don't, because you ultimately have more restrictions on the tobaccos that you can put in the filler. And that's why I blend to a smaller size, but then I can really taste the wrapper and the binder much more. So that's the more balanced approach to the blending that I do. And so the Corona is going to be released later in the year, probably a few months after PCA for summer, in small runs. But it's only, and the reason why I'm not trying to sell people on this is limited, you got to go out and buy it. I hope you support me, but at the end of the day, it's just the amount of product that can be manufactured. And that's why this is kind of unique. That we make more Corojo number fives, more Habano number threes, more Connecticut's. Those are available all the time. Yeah, but this is a really limited based on the availability of the wrapper, the material that's forcing us to only come out with a certain. I mean, we're slated to do only 60,000 cigars for the year, for the Corojo Seven.
So I heard somebody, I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Ranier Lorenzo, but they were talking about how they hated the term limited release because terming is something as a limited release means I shouldn't make it again, right? Because it's limited. If I can make it every year, it's a lie. It's not really a limited release. But what he called it was more or less, he said it should be really renamed to a yearly release
Okay, I mean,
because limited release, and I fall victim to this too. I think everybody does. Limited sounds great. I think limited sells cigars faster, but I've always felt like, is it really a limited release when you make it every year? But I get why, because there's only so many made. I guess I've always liked the term of like a yearly release over a limited release because I've always felt limited is just one and done. You're out.
yeah, I guess you're right. Maybe I should change the name of it.
I
I hadn't
mean,
thought about
nobody does. I didn't think
it.
about it until
No,
he
I
brought it
mean,
up. So I was just curious if you've ever thought about it like that because that
I
was a
I
big
don't
pet
I don't like
peeve.
calling things limited anything because it is true what you're saying. When we released this one for last year, it was slated to come out and then a full release this year. Um, yeah, I think here's where I'm at. I mean, we do have a limited production
Hmm.
for the current, uh, the way the brand is currently structured for the year. And then there is going to be, then you know what, we'll do the Corona yearly release. I hadn't really given thought to that. I don't like putting limited anything because the reality is that I think it's been oversold. It's more of
Yes,
a
that was
marketing
his
piece.
point.
I've always been against that. I mean, for me, I felt this was because of the limitations of production wise. That's the only time I ever do things of that nature. But like our my boutique side of Gran Habano's, the Zulu Zulus, the blue and green, those are just because we focus more on our core brands and we do a smaller runs of the blue and green, La Conquista, the Zulu Zoo. Those are more limited in boutique side of it, but and because we take further steps in making those cigars, where that means that the wrappers, the fillers, we select probably wrapper twice for some of these cigars that are more boutique-ish side of Grand Habanos. But going back to your point, yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think it's been oversold. I think this whole thing of trying to get the consumer, I think really at the end of the day, I want people to smoke my cigars, try them. If they love them, please stick to them. And I understand that. And I'm very genuine when it comes down to I do run a business, but at the end of the day, I understand where people's flavor profiles are different. But I do think that whole, I've never been a fan of that. Um, it's gonna come out. It's limited, and then you see it a year later, or that same blend gets changed, and that happens a lot in our industry. I'm not a big fan of that. I always wanted to give the customer what they really kind of deserve, and I always respect them. So I always think about them that way. Yeah, I think it's been oversold. I do agree with that.
Yeah, no, I would too. And you know, one of your other lines that you released not very long ago, I think maybe a year or so ago, unless my time frame is wrong, but the El Amingo, I'm
Yeah.
totally butchering that probably, right? El Mingo.
Ellen, and now you got me confused, and I speak Spanish. Right, I'll say it in Spanish because it's a lot easier. El enemigo,
El
which means
Enemigo.
enemigo means enemy, right? So a lot of people sometimes think of um, that's kind of, and that name means the enemy. Um, and the reason why I did that particular cigar and named it that was very simple, and it's not because I have an enemy out in the marketplace or anything like that. It's just I kind of consider myself that sometimes you're your own worst critic, and you're the one that limits yourself in the ability of moving forward. and I maybe some people could agree to that or disagree. So sometimes I'm my own worst enemy, and so that's why I named that, because it was a project that I wanted to launch, and it was hard for me to venture away from my factory, and that's why I went with that particular factory to make sure that I, you know, moved on, learn, be a Ronin, experience what other people are manufacturing cigars with, understand that there's something outside of my own factory and that you could learn from other factories and other rollers and other manufacturers. And that's kind of the experience of where that first project came about. And that's why I named it that.
And you know, you're making these questions actually really simple for me because you're literally flowing right into the next one. You actually had mentioned now I was going to bring that up is I kind of feel like it was a symbolism of you being your own worst enemy, you being closed off and not wanting to leave your Honduras sides
Hmm.
and moving forward. But the reality is you teamed up with Davidoff for that and you
Yeah.
left your Honduran roots. So you jumped ahead of the question on me that I was going to go for there, but you brought in something and you glassed over it, and I wanted you to kind of expound on it a little bit because it's a terminology that you really don't hear anymore, and it's something that's said in different stages of a business's career and of business's life cycle, the Ronin stage.
Yeah.
And one of the this inspired that Ronin stage for you. So A, can you explain to everybody or define Ronin stage in your opinion, and why was this considered that for you?
So I always felt that, you know, there's a point in time when you grow within your own infrastructure as a business owner, and you do things in a particular way, and there's a ceiling of knowledge and understanding of how you perceive, how you work, how you do things. And my approach to it is that sometimes you have to go and walk the path in order to understand and learn from other people. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's where I felt during COVID that in order for me to continue to grow and understand where I wanted to go, I needed to go and venture and learn from other people. That I've always felt that knowledge is power, that information is power, and that you should never be close-minded to think that you know everything. And I don't. There's a lot of faults when you think that way, because the simplest person could teach you something.
Mhm.
And so at the end of the day, that's where I'm at. I'm at the stage where I want to venture off. Not only do other libraries of tobacco exist with other manufacturers, other techniques ultimately exist. And I know there's quite a few people that sort of feel that way. And I've learned a lot over the years. I've had a lot of mentors, and things that I've applied to my manufacturing. And I'm still in the process. I'm in my 40s at this point in time. It's been some time, but I
In
think
my
I still have.
40s, in my 40s, I'm in my 40s. I'm guys. He thinks he's old as in his 40s. I'm just about to turn 40. George, you look significantly better than I do.
I
I I
appreciate it.
I look like I've lived outside most of my life. I mean, look at this skin. No, I'm just kidding. But the reality of it is, in your 40s, you're still young as hell. I don't think most people realize how long you've been in this business. So when you say I'm in my 40s and I made the one of the number one selling cigars 20 years ago, which was the Crojo 5. Like, I don't think people understand that lineage that you have. Inside of your family came from Cuba,
Oh, Colombia.
or Colombia. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Colombia.
no time.
And but they were there was a tie to Cuba, thought though, right?
No, no. I mean, it was the tobacco that was brought over to Colombia. Some of the seeds were originally from Cuba, and that's where. But the techniques and everything that we manufacture in Colombia technically were a little bit different than what Cuba evolved, Central America evolved to grow tobacco. But I am a fourth generation tobacco farmer. That's where the tie probably is just the seeds, really. I appreciate the culture. My wife's Cuban, so I guess that's as close as I'm gonna get.
Well, the other side of it too is you kind of brought Gran Habano to what it is with its own cigar lines.
Mhm.
to the level it is. Before you guys were sellers of a lot of you guys were selling a lot of tobacco. You weren't necessarily rolling and had core lines to the level and extent that you do now.
No,
Correct?
I mean, we were, I mean, we were doing a lot of private labels for a lot of companies that have come and gone since some of them were pretty big, some of them have gone and moved on. But that was sort of my dad's work at the beginning in the early '90s, was the fact that we were just making private label, selling tobacco leaf, and then I wanted to be able to participate in the industry, and then so it took a few years to come out with a brand. And 2001 is when we launched the brand, and it's been ever since.
And since then, actually, you've developed quite the reputation for blending tobaccos from multiple regions: Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Ecuador. What has kind of been the process from this in 2001, and how have you kind of chameleoned yourself into what you are now? Meaning, was 2001 shaky and rough, or since you guys had the private label experience, it was a little easier to get into? And then today, what is your approach and how did it differ from back then? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, see, I guess being in the business from the mid '90s on and understanding, so even though I was very young at that time, and transitioning over to a brand owner and moving forward, to having a pretty significant brand in the industry. There's a lot of experiences, but a lot of people don't realize that we had a cigar boom in the '90s,
Oh yeah.
but the floor fell out of the cigar industry like in 1996, '97. And there wasn't a lot of options out there. I mean, the most popular cigar at the time was really CAO, and there was the market had crashed. There was not a lot of brands, and because we were utilizing different blends, a lot of people didn't really tell people that they were blending, or a lot of cigars were Nicaraguan, only Nicaraguan or Honduran or Dominican. And when we came on the scene, I mean, it was something that was just different because we were using tobaccos from different countries, different regions, utilizing different flavor profiles, and we told people about that. So it was just, I guess I would have to say it was the right time, with the right product. And we brought it onto the market, and a lot of people really appreciated it, liked it, and then we moved on from there. And then to keep going, I mean, blending wise has always been my passion. I mean, it's just kind of, going back to the roning stage, just kind of like looking for that perfect leaf that matches to what you're already growing, what we're doing. So adding components and different seeds and different flavor profiles has always been kind of my goal. And I've always been chasing the next best project. But someone told me, George Brightman asked me, like, or he told me, what's your favorite, what's your best project? And I'm the one that I'm seeking next, and the best one prior to that. So it's kind of one of those things that I've always envisioned myself just being challenged, and the tobacco is the one thing that challenges you, because there's a lot to it. A lot of people don't realize that. I mean, tobacco, and the reason why I have a passion for it is because it's ever evolving. I mean, it's a crop that you plant, but every year weather changes, fertilization changes, river, rain, all these things affect it. And then what you're producing with that tobacco a year or two later could be very well different than what you planted 4 years ago. And so the challenge is always there. To how do you marry two different types of tobacco from two different regions? That's a tough one too. So that's the passion and the reason why I love what I do.
And having the early success that you guys had really actually allowed you to play.
Yes.
It allowed you to have the industry alter ego of I'm creating the traditional 135, and then I'm going to go play for a little bit. I'm going to throw in
Yeah.
the Black Dahlia. I'm going to throw the Zulu.
Well, a
I'm
lot
going
of
to.
people don't realize that we had, prior to that, we had the Azteca, which was Mexican wrapper before Mexican wrapper became what Mexican wrapper is now.
So
Uh,
it was a Sandres before Sandres. is what
Was
it
even
is.
popular. I mean, we had I had a sales meeting when we were about to introduce it back in 2005, I believe, or 2006, and the Azteca was getting ready to release, and people were like, "Do not tell people that this is Mexican wrapper." And I was like, "Why not?" And it's like, "Cause people think Mexican cigars are trash." And I was like, "No, but that's the thing. There's trash cigars, and there's great tobacco." And we're going to
Yeah.
tell people what it is. And so, I mean, it's always been my passion. The VL was a Connecticut broadleaf for its time back in 2004, 5, and then that's something that now it's become very prevalent. But so that's always been my vision to like try to be beyond the curve as much as possible,
Yeah, but
looking for what's the next.
you've put yourself in that mindset. The industry gave you the ability to coast if you really wanted to with the success of your cigars, and you chose to not be complacent
Yeah,
and to actually get out there and have some fun with it. I mean, you have said this often, which is one of the things I've loved about Gran Habano is you often have described that you guys have a boutique mindset, even though you some might not look at certain lines of yours because of the size of being boutique. So what I say by that is. 135 and 5 Maduro, I wouldn't consider to be boutique. I would be consider those to be core industry standard great rolled cigars
yes.
that are going to beat against any other core line from it. But where you were able to go boutique with it and get crazy with it was what you did in between, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
And
no, that's really where I'm at. Yeah. And that's where I've been playing all this time.
why did you want to take that risk? That's a risk, right? Like when you're like, oh, I'm gonna make the five gets all these awards, and you're going, I'm not satisfied with where I'm at though. I want to play more. I want to bend kind of outside the box more. Um, what was the first project you did boutique outside of that 135?
The real boutique outside of that, that's probably the Zulu project. That was kind of the one thing that I was playing around for a while. And then it was really, I built the factory around the project. But prior to that, actually, no, the real first boutique was the American Puro. There's a lot of projects that I worked on, but the American Puro is where we started the factory in Miami to just make a cigar in the US. And so I went and I built this whole factory just to make cigars here in the US. And I wanted to use just American tobacco. Everything was American, the boxes, the paper, the cigars, rolled in the US. And that was the first. And then I was using Kentucky Darkfire, which was, you know, a play on originally, which was very similar to the Perique that I tried in some of the other blends, but I did the Kentucky within the blend, and that was the American Puro. Yeah, actually, that's what it was. Then I transitioned to Zulu Zulus and some of the other projects that I can't remember. There's been a lot.
Yeah, but it almost seems like the number series got you the ability to kind of play within the boutique world and really kind of stretch. Am I wrong
Yeah.
in that?
No, 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 no. Number one, three, and five material is what keeps our business going. It's kind of our what we've forecast, manufacture. Really, my 60% of the effort goes into focusing that. We continue to do that. So of course, we have our core brands, but then we have our premium lines. That's all the boutique side of things, and it's just kind of geared towards that consumer that's looking for a different look on Gran Habanos.
And that's where I fell in love with Gran Habano. Of course, the five is great, the three's great, the one's great. Um, I fell in love with Gran Habano the first time I lit up that Black Dahlia.
Yeah, that's a great
It's
cigar.
so unique. I actually did a review on it as one of my higher watched reviews. It was such a unique flavor profile. It was different than anything you've currently put out. And that's why I asked the question the way I did because
Yeah.
you stretched yourself beyond. So it's like every. I know you're a big music guy too. So it's like every musician's like got that one album where you're like it's a little off. It's not what they normally do, but you didn't care. You ran with that idea and you said,
Yeah.
"No, I'm going to actually let you guys see what my blending skills can be, play with these tobaccos that are out of the norm, use never used stuff.
Yeah.
And it's fun, and I've had a great time over the last 4 years smoking through the Gran Habano line, because it's rare in a company where you can have a core line and quote unquote their boutiques be polar opposites in so many different ways. Like, if I was to have an unblended five and an unblended Dolly, I wouldn't have said they were from the same place.
Well, that's it is true, and I mean every project to me is different, and every time I want to give someone a different look on something that I made before, and I don't want comparables. You could compare it to this is the project, this is what he makes, but I don't want to be held on to the idea that I only exist on the Corojo 5, which is a great cigar. I mean, I tell my
Yeah.
customers, I say, look, you're getting a $12, $15 cigar for a really inexpensive price. And I do that on purpose because I'm always thinking of the consumer. Um, Whereas then what allows me to play and have fun is all these unique projects that kind of stretch the boundaries of what the company or some other companies will stay focused to just what their flavor profiles, and I get that there's a strategy to farming a certain amount of tobacco, acquiring every year the same tobacco, doing all that, but why can't you experiment? Why can't you continue to push your own boundaries and fall
Yep.
short? Some of my projects I thought were great, but at the end of the day, the consumer is the one that judges what the project, how good it was, where I failed. And it's true. It's like an album, you know. This is then my time right now. This is what I'm producing, and then it might have been missed by some people, and some come back later and realize that it was something unique. So that's kind of like where I'm going.
Well, I think the seven you've done well, but again, I think you're too far down the boutique blending road for that mindset to turn off, for you to kind of, you've put a lot of what you've learned since the five in blending the dolly and blending all of these other inside the seven. Now I wouldn't necessarily, because you're calling it part of your core, but this is above, and this is kind of a new old flavor for Gran
Hmm.
Habano. It encompasses a new profile, a new complexity to it, still has that same beautiful draw, of course, but it still has that same mouth profile and feel, the smoothness to it. But I would call this a step away from the five as far as blending skill. You can tell
Yeah.
it's significantly different than when you started.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, of course. I mean, that's where when I was going to release the seven, because I've always wanted to release the seven. I mean, I skipped the seven a lot of times, and look for other names for projects, but seven has been on my mind for 20 years, and it's really I wanted to come back to it and have an opportunity to really kind of showcase what the boutique side, which is to what you've been asking, the point that you're saying is the boutique side, but now is gonna pop out in the core brands. And that's kind of, yes, it's true. That was a focus as well.
You
Yes.
become an MMA fighter in the sense of you've learned multiple different skills, and you've been able to encompass them now in your profile. You've
Yeah.
been able
Yeah.
to, so and I hope that, please take that as a huge compliment, because you've been your own worst enemy. You've stretched outside your own box. You've learned all these different skills, but yet in the seven you're showcasing the different skills, but you still do hold true to that core line of the number
Yeah.
series. And you brought up your factory being in Miami, and for those of you that don't know, his factory is actually located in the Miami's Little Havana section.
Yeah.
How has that cigar city, that epic cigar city culture, influenced your work, and the identity of Gran Habano?
Hugely. I mean, with the factory, and since I closed the factory, because it's kind of one, we still have our factory in Honduras, but ultimately it's kind of one of those things where I do limit projects to their life expectancy that I feel they've transitioned, right? And when I say that, is it's kind of like the factory and the project of the American Puro lived until I felt that people, there was some saturations with flavor profiles of that same tobacco, and that's why I felt like, kind of one of those that, like, if people don't get it, I just walk away from it because they're missing what the purpose of it was at that time. But Miami has influenced me a lot because there has been a lot of, and that's what I found. That was one of the best learning experiences for me because I learned all my rollers were from Cuba, and they had just come over, probably within the couple years from me opening, and we came together, and all the techniques that they were using in Cuba I got to learn from. And I built this factory, and it was just how they finish the cigars, how they roll the cigars. It was just different techniques that I didn't have privy to because, Cuba is Cuba and we're Honduras and
Sure.
Dominican. And so it was huge. I mean, and culturally, I think Miami has always been a city of immigrants, and there's a huge Cuban population, and they brought in a lot of knowledge. And those people have also gone to Central America and built their factories, and that has a huge influence of where I started and what people have done with cigars, and I love to honor that. It's just one of the things that I love.
You brought up Cuban rollers. Every time I hear anybody say Cuban rollers, I always think of the Seinfeld show. That episode where where Kramer, I've got Cubans. They're right
Hold on,
here.
let me get them out of the cabinet. I got
So,
Cubans.
yeah.
I should
uh,
have done something like that. I didn't think about it. During COVID, I saw all the Seinfeld episodes, because I had time, and I recommend it. It's really good. It's still good to this day, and I know a lot of people have seen it, but having watched it when I was a kid and then watching it now, it's phenomenal.
oh yeah, no, it is good. We actually have a question here, so I'm curious about this question because I know what there's a new American all American driven cigar on the market that's right around $25 depending on your state taxes. Um, I don't know if you're familiar with what I'm talking about from JC Newman called the American.
Oh,
Um,
I did see that a few years back when it first came out, but I don't know much about that.
well, the question here is what would the cost difference? Because back then, the American tobacco market was probably a significantly less expensive market than what it is today. What would the cost of what did you sell the American for originally, and what do you think you would have to sell it to today to maintain that quality? Just want to
So
show everybody the difference in pricing from
yeah,
years ago.
I think the American at the time, this is 12 years ago, was sold for about no, $8, $9, and probably now, yeah, you would have to probably be in the $15 to $20. And tobaccos, American tobaccos, what I was using, um, have become really scarce.
Hmm.
And that's really more because a lot of the bigger companies have come and monopolize a lot of the farmers, and there's a lot less farmers. A lot of those fields from back in the early 2000s that were being farmed at that time, and still to the tens, are now someone's lawn. They became, yeah,
Yeah.
seriously, they put a lot of houses on top of those things. Because I used to go up there as a kid, not a kid, but in my 20s, and it was a lot of tobacco farms. And then now I go back once in a while to Pennsylvania, and I've gone to Connecticut only once in the last, like, 15 years, and it's all basically homes over them. So it would be a lot more expensive. It'd probably be double, $16 to $20, because of taxes and all these other things too, though.
Yeah, I know it's American made anything is 99% better most of the time. Now, I'll be honest with you, I can't speak about cigars. I mean, we didn't come up with them most of the time. The Dominican, in my opinion, Honduras, Nicaragua, they probably roll much better than us Americans do. I mean, we're fat fingered in many ways. Um, but so I'm not going to say that we roll better, but usually it's just more expensive to offer a product like that. With
Yeah.
kind of the way the political market is going right now, without getting into politics, I don't care to talk about it. Would you ever consider bringing out a V2 version of the American as like an kind of capitalizing on that or bringing it back? Does that make sense? Kind of what I'm asking.
So, look, do I want to make the American Puro again? I would love to. That it kind of that was a thing for its time. That was beautiful, and if you ever find one, try it. It's an old cigar at this point in time. But would I love to do it? Yeah, but would it garnish that enthusiasm that I had behind it? The fact that I spent so much on a factory to produce so little cigars, and it's just really the love and passion of it. I would have to find myself in that space where I would have to recreate everything at that moment in time and then introduce it, because I don't like making cigars to gouge people or capitalize on
Sure.
something. I don't. I mean, I am in business. I make cigars. I focus on that. But at the end of the day, with something like that, it's just to kind of, if anything, I would do it just to have people try something unique and different. And that's where my mindset goes to that. That I want to sell you a $50 cigar, and no, that's not my thing. I want you to enjoy the best cigar in the world that it's made in Miami. If I could do it again, I would.
See, I love that you said a $50 cigar isn't your thing because the market's, excuse my language, fucking saturated with 30, 50, 60, 70, $80. And I'll be honest with you, George. I'll be honest with you. I have people that have been gracious enough to give me Cubans or expensive cigars or whatever the dollar value is. More than what I would normally spend on a cigar is the dollar value. And everybody always asks me, "Would you buy it? Would you buy it again? And or did you like it?" Well, of course I liked it, but the better question is, would I spend my own money on it? And I will say, outside of a couple handful, the vast majority of the time, I could find a $10 or $15 one that's equivalent, just as good, just as so. What, in your opinion, as somebody who's been in this industry, literally grown up in this industry, talking about tobacco at the dinner table, in this industry, why do you think there are so many damn expensive cigars today versus 10, 15? Is it because people will spend the money? Is it really that simple?
I think it's a. I think what happened was it's a reflection of our culture and time, and it's something that maybe people will get 10 years from now. And I equate it to something maybe more in the '80s, where luxury and post COVID, a lot of people kind of wanted those extremes. And maybe it's a correlation between how much disposable income was running around post COVID with the government giving out handouts and all these things. And maybe it just, I think as cigar manufacturers, a lot of cigar manufacturers don't travel and understand their consumers. And I think the reality is that sometimes they're insulated from their consumers where they make cigars, and their perspective is that if they make a certain cigar and price it at a level, they could garnish more attention and make the brand bigger. Maybe that's a mindset, but at the same time they're disconnected that the average consumer focuses on quality with price.
Yes, I
and and
agree.
and so, but then at the same time, it's kind of one of those things that, some of these big expensive cigars are big known brands that could garnish that.
I'm not
And
talking
I
about this.
understand
I'm not
that.
talking about the core line cigars that are $30 or $40. Those are, without naming any of those brands, we all know who they are. Those brands aren't going anywhere. I'm talking about the limited edition, one off, $50, four, five, $600 box worth of cigars, where
Shit.
you're
Wow.
like, and people are buying them, and to me, I've just never, and maybe because I'm a cheap ass, but I honestly, I look at that more. So my brother's in the car industry, really big in the car industry. And I asked him one time, why is a McLaren worth 1.5? And he said, because people will pay for it. And I said, so it's not actually worth 1.5. He said, no car is worth over $100,000. He goes, people will just pay for it. So I kind of feel like, to your point, COVID kind of put a lot of extra money in people's hands. And since COVID, we've seen a lot of 30, 40, 50. I just feel like they're capitalizing on that versus the cigar really commanding that value.
I think the problem is that you put a bar when you get to that extreme price point. I think you do are there's some the cigars out there that could garnish that. And really,
100%.
my way of thinking that is legacy, company, the tobaccos, what they do to make that cigar, the selection of the tobaccos. And I'm looking back as a manufacturer where we spend time aging the tobacco, we cure it in a particular way that's different. Um, we warehouse it for a longer period of time. We do all these different steps that make that cigar special. And at that point in time, I do see that a cigar could garnish that. But when you have brands that, and look, mind you, I mean, I more power to them.
Yeah,
But
for sure.
I think at the end of the day, it's really up to the consumer to kind of educate themselves and know what really, really good value cigars are, and then what really stands out at a price point, and then what makes it special. That's what you got to find out, and are you willing to pay that? And I guess that's the only thing I could say. I mean,
So
I love.
I'm curious to hear. I'm curious at this really quick.
Mhm.
How would your father react if you told him that there's $100 cigar being sold today? I mean, what's the reality? Like, what? I mean,
I could see his face, and he could definitely go like, "What?" Like, and then knowing him, he's like, "Can we do that too?" And then I'll be like, "No,"
can we do that too?
and then I would be like, "We can, but we shouldn't." But I'm very transparent and truthful. And look, um, sometimes I get upset over the fact, and I'll be frank, I get upset over the fact that sometimes people quote my cigar as a great cigar for the price. And,
It's insulting.
it is to a degree because when I have the opportunity, I tell them, look, I could charge you $15 for the cigar. But
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
no, my Corojo number 5,
Um,
the effort that goes in. I mean, any farmer, and this is where people sometimes they don't realize what things really cost. And that's where, and then there's a lot of your own, right, that you give out. But and then and I'm going to tell you this is because this is the way I see it. I sometimes people come and ask me if I can make them a cigar, and they'll give me a price point, and I'm like, it's insulting because, and that's why I don't make a lot of cigars for people private label, is because of the fact that you go farm one tobacco plant, but you need a whole field to do this. So go spend some time, rent an acre, put people to work, farm tobacco, then build giant houses where you're going to now pay people to cut the leaves, stem them, put them in strands, hang them up. In the meantime, you're financing all this, and you're already like 6 months into it, of hanging some tobacco leaves after the fact, drying them, bringing them down. Then now you're going to go to put them in a barn to dry. Then you're going to take them to a warehouse and cure them for about a year and a half. Mind you, you're still financing this. You're paying a whole bunch of workers to do this. And then you're going to select the tobacco leaves. Then those tobacco leaves are going to be rolled by someone that has years of experience in
Still
rolling
hasn't
cigars.
made a dollar yet in his story, guys. Still hasn't
Not
made a
yet,
dollar
not
yet.
yet.
Just,
I'm
just,
still
just wanted
paying
to point
interest on
that.
the loan.
Just
I'm
wanted to
still
point
paying.
that out.
Yeah, I'm still paying interest on the loan. And then, 2 years later, you roll a cigar, then you age it for 6 months to get the level of humidity down. Then you package it. Then you fly it over on a plane or bring it on a boat, and then you put it in your warehouse and you expect someone to sell it, buy it from you, and then you send it to the store, and then you go and you all this to make for you to purchase one cigar, and all this effort and time and love and attention and all this knowledge that you're inputting. You're in business. I get it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not crying here. And you're making millions of cigars in order to offset the costs. I get all that. But for you to do that on your own, how much would it cost you? Time and effort. So it's insulting sometimes when they tell me these prices, and I'm like, well, you can, because what you're gonna get is a cheap cigar that you're gonna slap a $2 band on, and you're gonna go out and say that it's worth 15, $20, and that's why I do what I do, is because I'm always thinking of the consumer. And so when they tell me it's a great cigar for the price, I do appreciate that, but I could also charge you more for it for you to love me more. Or do you love me because I think of you? So that's where I leave it off with that.
See, I think if it's a great cigar, it's a great cigar. For the
Yeah.
price has not a damn thing to do with it.
Yeah.
A great, a great basketball player is a great basketball player, even though he didn't make as much as the more expensive basketball player. He's still a great basketball player. So it's that same kind of understanding here, and I
Yeah.
totally get where you're coming from, and
Oh, and listen, I love the people buy my cigar. I appreciate it. I love packing them myself in the boxes and orders. I love doing everything that I do. Things that because I still feel like that 17-year-old that worked at a warehouse receiving shipments, and I'm still in that mindset, and the passion that I have for it. And I'm not complaining. All I'm saying is that at the end of the day, there's a lot that goes into it that sometimes people don't appreciate. And yeah, at the end, and that being said, ultimately my goal is to please the consumer. That's all I live for. um, you know that I'm successful at it will come later. But the success is going to be because people support you and they appreciate what you do, and I think
you
that's
you were
that's where I'm at.
also sorry. Go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt.
No, 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 that's it.
I would say you're also one of the youngest blenders at the time when you started to get into blending in the
Oh,
industry at that time. I
yeah, I
mean,
was
to be at your
21.
to be 20 early 20s in a blender, that's very few could honestly say that. And a big reason for that was your father,
Yeah, you,
Guillermo, and
Guillermo.
or
um
Guillermo. I'm
oh,
the
no, it's fine.
worst at pronouncing everything. I can barely even say my own name sometimes, so please don't hold me to it. But I know with working with your father, that must have obviously shaped Gran Habano in very profound ways. So, what was it like learning that craft from him? And kind of how did your collaboration evolve as you took on more leadership? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the fundamentals were very important because it kind of really gave me an understanding of tobacco. I think ultimately, if you're gonna, and I've always told people, you have to know your fundamentals to understand your product, understand what you're doing. But it starts really from seed. If you really know the process from the beginning to the end, and then I learned that from him. I learned that from a lot of people associated within the organization. And then I did learn from a lot of old guys that are come and gone, great cigar brand owners that I would ask questions about. And I said I had a lot of great mentors because and that's one of the things that I learned, that you have to share. You have to share the knowledge because the next generation That's how you lose things. And I've
Yes.
always been a proponent of educating people as much as possible in the process of what a cigar, what it takes to make a cigar. But then my traveling at the beginning to be the ambassador of the brand, really ultimately led me to really have an understanding what the consumers were expecting, what they were lacking at the time, what the industry was lacking, what I could be, the space that was open for me to be creative and feed to the market. And that's kind of what kind of drove me at the beginning, where like, hey, everybody's doing Cameroon, early 2000s. Where can I go? Let me go to Mexico. You know, let me go to Connecticut, and try different things that are not being tried in the market and give the consumers something different. And that's where kind of that was a pathway that led me to becoming more involved in blending, kind of trial by error, because it was a long process of learning. You know, I did a few projects at the beginning that we're successful to a degree, but I think we're still very infant. The brand was still not very, even though we were a big brand already compared to where we started within 4 years. Um, I think we weren't there for enough customers to really kind of appreciate what we were doing or what I was doing until, you know, it took until the early 2000s with with the Zulus, with the American Puro, and then it just, then everything I was learning, then it went into La Conquista, then the Black Dahlia, then the Blue and Green, and then the 20th anniversary. So those are kind of you've been, if you smoke my cigars throughout that course, you've been on the same path with me. So you've smoked and learned what I've learned through the process.
Now, obviously, in working with your dad, and I kind of feel like you guys have successfully crossed genres, if we're going to throw it an honor, meaning there are so many tobacco producing companies that don't make their own cigars, that don't make cigars for themselves. You guys managed to cross over, and you did it successfully. And I know in the early stages of you coming on, there might have been some butting heads with your dad with the old ways and you wanting to kind of take it a new way. So how, when roles got blurred between your personal and professional inside of a family business, how did you and your father kind of divide those responsibilities, and kind of what was the strength that each of you brought to Gran Habano, where you were able to be like, I would never, I couldn't get away with this to my dad, but maybe you could have. Shut up and sit down. I'm in control a little bit.
Well, it's funny. A lot of people don't probably don't know the backstory. There's a story in Cigar Aficionado back in '08. It it was a learning experience where it's hard for old guard to give space. And
Glad you brought up the
my
article because that inspired the question.
yeah. So well, and I'm very, very, very open about things, and I'm very transparent when it comes, because the reality is that you can't hide the truth, right? So my dad has this saying that I hate, that he says is the new lion coming on board. And so, you know, meaning, you know, you have the old lion that's, you know, he's the leader, and then the new lion comes to challenge. And I get that. So it took me leading the company to let him understand, I think, ultimately. And look, I don't know everything. I made a lot of mistakes during that period of time as well, but I felt that we were transitioning to another level, and we needed to do things a little bit different. And my mindset from business is a little bit more organizational, more focused. And my dad's kind of like a gunslinger, where he's, you know, ready to roll with a really good idea. But I'm one of those that, like, okay, I play it out in my mind, and I'm like 20 steps forward already thinking of how we're gonna fall or fail, and then go backwards and be like, okay, how do we not make that mistake in the future? And so that's where it kind of took me leaving for him to understand that there was a space that I needed to have in order for me to grow. And then he really kind of gave me that room afterwards when I came back. And I really appreciate that from him because it gave me that room to grow and take us to a new level. From '08 to 2014, we've tripled our sales when I came back. And it was because me not having this as well made me realize all the mistakes that I could create or do and then come back and refocus. And I was only out for like 9 months. But it then it defined the roles. It defined the roles where he understood that I was here. I understood the customer base. I understood the consumer. I understood where the brand needed to go, what we needed to do, marketing, within our budget, of course, because, we're still an emerging brand at the time. And then, in essence, he focused more on the factory and on the farming and really kind of feeding the factory the materials that were needed in order for me to produce what I wanted or thought that we needed to supply the market, but at the same time maintain the quality of the core brands. And that's where we are now. And then I've always been a huge proponent that you have to what you do well, what you're doing really well with, just improve on that. And so that's kind of one of the things where we're at, where, pre-COVID, we were doing Corona number five, and Corona number five is great, and a lot of people are smoking it, and the material is great. But let's improve on that, and let's give people a better Corona number five. And so we farmed more, and we changed the way we were farming to select better leaves, farm better leaves, and I think the last few years. I think people are really have come back to the brand even stronger. The brand is much stronger than it ever was, and it was because we improved on the core brand and what people really, and that's what has cemented that brand to become as popular as it is because we. My mindset is let's keep working on what we're doing and do better on what we're doing with that particular product. So that's kind of if that makes sense,
Oh
the
yeah, no,
transition ability.
absolutely, absolutely. And just to answer your question, Vinny, yes, George is a partner of this show, and actually, I all I did was call him to be on the 4 year anniversary show, and he said I want to be a part of it. So I didn't even ask him. It was something that he actually wanted to do, and so my guess is your father was kind of a little bit like mine in the sense of when they gave you the reins, you didn't realize it until about 5 years after it happened. When you look back and go, okay, that was our first challenge where you backed off.
Yeah,
So what was
and
that? What was that like for you in that first? Did you realize your father backed off of you? Or did you kind of realize that after the fact where he
I don't
gave
think
you
he's
more
ever backed off.
but I mean he gave you more
No, I know.
reins.
I'm
He
just
gave
messing him
you
up.
yeah.
Yeah, no, he gave me the space, and
Cuz obviously he didn't advertise it. He probably didn't go, "George, this is your crowning moment. You've got the he just kind of subtly
yeah,
backed off and you might not have realized it for a while.
yeah. Ultimately, I think it's one of those that after years, I realized that I had made my space where um, I could grow and expand. And ultimately, it took me a few years, but at the same time, I think maybe I wasn't paying attention as much because I was just focused on growing the brand, coming back, and really my head in the dirt, just focusing on. And I shouldn't say head in the dirt, but just like my head on my table, my work table,
Yeah,
just
head down, head down.
yeah, head down. And so, but then looking up and having time to breathe and having success, I realized that ultimately going back, he's given me the reins that I ultimately needed in order to grow. Uh, to where I am now. And I do to this day. And when I say he hasn't backed off, is he comes back and he gives me great points, because you need that. You need that. I think people that don't have someone that gives them um, a comment, compliments all the time aren't good either. I think you need someone to judge you from outside and understand, and then give you that perspective in order for you
Yes.
to learn from your mistakes, right?
Yep.
And I think that's important. I think that's one of the key things that I respect every opinion he gives me, and I go back to my drawing board and I'm like, oh shoot, I'm doing this wrong. Let me focus on this. But he's given me that space that I needed.
Yes, men sink companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yes, men sink
100%.
companies. 100%. And one of the things that I had to go through kind of with my dad is you kind of have this with kids, right? And your dad had a different level of letting go with his son being in the business, right? There's multiple levels of a parent letting go, and that was kind of his final step of being able to kind of turn everything over to you. And I say it like this because you brought it up several times. He's never really backed off. So I have subjects with my mom that I'm like, do we really want to talk about this? Do we really want to talk about this? And then I've tried that with my dad, and his response is, listen, boy, I'm your father, and I don't care how old you are. You don't have to listen to anything I say, but I'm going to say it. And my guess is your dad was kind of along those lines of, I'm going to say it. I don't care if you don't want to hear it. You're gonna hear it.
My dad and I have had some contentious arguments, but I'm gonna say it here, and I will leave it on the record forever, because what goes on the internet will stay on the record forever. But it was the greatest comeback I ever, and I hope to use it one day. But we had an argument, and I was just not chastising him, but I was like, no, this is the way. And he understood at that point that I was right. But he said the one liner, not a one liner, but he said a line that really to this day makes it cemented me staying quiet. And it's hard to get me to stay quiet. But at that point in time when I was winning the argument, he goes, you know what? At the end of the day, you were a sperm on my ball sack. And so, how do you come back from that? And so those are the things that, yeah, I guess like family says. That they have the luxury of saying that, but I thought that was the one line that, like, damn, how do you come? I stayed quiet and we had a drink.
A similar story. My buddy's dad used to tell him, "I wish I'd have thrown you out in Kleenex." And it was a
Oh,
long
Lord.
time. It was so long before we realized what he was even talking about. But yeah,
Oh,
but it was kind of a long time. Vinny coming in. Your father is now my hero. And keeping that same family line, you've grown up in this business. You've watched your parents go through struggles and dinner table conversations around business and personal, and we don't talk this, that, and the other. Your wife Natasha is now also obviously part of this business. And how do you how does your influence of how you watched your mom and your father communicate within this industry kind of shape how you and Natasha's relationship is? I'm not talking personal, I'm talking on a
yeah.
business side
It's
in
just-
this industry.
I think it's kind of one of those things that sometimes I find myself that, it's I am my father's son. And sometimes I need to give people space. So, it's kind of like that contentious situation where you don't realize that some people need to have space to grow. And I find myself doing those mistakes, but we managed well over the years to kind of, because you do need to keep it in a family. And this is why I love cigars, because outside of some other industries, this is really a family business, that it's a trade that you pass on. The idea that you could come in and make a cigar could happen to a lot of people, but the understanding of what it is to farm make cigars, run a factory, and things of that, you need those key people in your life. And I'm privileged to have people that are I consider family that are not blood, but within that, it's tough at times, especially at the beginning, because you don't want to let go of the baby. This is my baby. This is what since I was 17, I've been involved in the business in some way or another, and realize that you need to have other people come and help you to grow, because you can't do it all on your own. And that's important.
Define, by your terms, work-life balance.
Work life balance. Work hard Monday through Friday. Stay home Saturday and Sunday. And try to keep the business. It's hard, but try to keep a balance of business where you need space to have a personal life.
Do you
And
and
that's
your
hard, but you need to learn to do that.
do you and your wife have no business talk times where you're like, we're not talking shop around the dinner table. Like we're not
Yeah.
going out to dinner, and it's like the parents that go out to get away from their kid for a break and all they do is talk about the kid. Do you guys ever try to avoid that? Like
No,
it's
no,
hard. It's hard.
it's hard, but it's become, as you progress and you understand it, uh, it does kind of become part of your language, and you touch on things during your personal, but then you also have to have a balance of covering. So as long as it's not overwhelming the personal side of it, it's important. But the business never leaves the conversation. It does. I will tell you, anybody that works in a family business will realize that you can't escape, but you have to learn to maybe right before you go to bed not discuss what you felt to do during the week. Did you forget to send that email? That's you need to learn to do that.
Yeah, I've heard in talking with a lot of people in this business, the oh, I hate my family members sometimes between the times of 8 and 5, but after 5 o'clock we're great. We're best of friends. But between 8 and 5, man, we'll bicker like it's nobody's business, and it could be like a
Oh,
reality show, and that's really kind of, and it's weird to think of it like that. That's kind of the harmonious nature of a family business, right? It's
yeah, yeah.
everyone fights with it's Thanksgiving 24/7, right? To an extent.
I never thought about it that, but yeah. As long as it doesn't get as bad as I've never watched The Bear, but the only episode I ever watched was that Thanksgiving dinner, and because I walked into it while my wife was watching it, and I realized that yeah, you don't need that. If it gets to that point, you're in trouble.
So here, just closing up kind of the family questions here is, um obviously you're still super young. I know there's people in the industry that you consider family, but at a certain point in time, the passing the torch within the business comes along. So, what is kind of your plan of passing the torch? What would you like to see? How would you like to see Gran Habano 30, 40 years from now after you're gone within the company?
Well, I definitely my vision, my passion is to grow this, to pass it on to a family member, whether it's my son, my daughter, my sister, that come on board and really get to learn. And they don't. The great thing is they don't have to start off sweeping a warehouse and packing boxes and things of that nature, and like really struggling. But I will. I want to leave this off to someone that wants to do and learn everything that I have to share, um, and pass that on. And in 30 years, that they could feed their families, that they could have something for their families, that then their families could pass on and have a legacy. And that's my ultimate goal on this. I don't ever expect, and I shouldn't say you just never know, but I don't ever want to sell this. I don't ever want to close shop. I think I would rather die before I stop
Oh,
doing
for
this.
sure.
That's how passionate I am about it, and it's just, if I could leave this 10 times better than where I am now, and I'm able to pass it on, and they're able to care for it as much as I care for it and pass it on to the next generation after that, I would love to be there. And my goal is to continue to grow, learn, and really, I don't know. I don't know what the future will hold, but I know that I'm going to work 100% every single day to make sure that there's something 30 years from now.
What was the sacrificial crossroads for you in this business where you had to decide, I'm going to take left or I'm going to take right, and what did you give up for that?
Well, and I never talked about it, but I, my brother passing early on, um, in '99, was a really tough moment where it made me realize that I needed to. And at the time, I was only 18, and I think I was 19 actually. Made me realize that I needed to step up and really become a man, and really focus on helping my family to grow. And that was a huge turning point for me. I still, to this day, it's one of those things that never leaves you. And it, out of the many forks in the road, that was probably one of the ones that really engraved in my brain that you need to work hard for your family, to focus on making sure that they're okay. And that's kind of like a big one for me. That I spent a lot of times in a car, on a plane. I've never complained about that. Is it taxing on the body? Visiting almost 49 states in the country, traveling. I never complained about that. I would do it all over again. But and I still continue to do it. That was probably a big fork in the road.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that because that's not something that a lot of people probably have heard before, that story. So I appreciate that, and I love asking these types of questions because it's these questions that solidify a brand in someone's mind. It's, I'm like them. I've gone through that. I've had the disagreements. I've had the crossroads. I've had deaths in the family. And it to show that that's how it's not just shaped you, but shaped the brand, draws people in with similar backgrounds closer to that brand. And I'm a firm believer of that. That's why I don't focus a lot on product. That's why I focus on much more your backstory, because if we can make, if my theory is, if the connection can be made where you can kind of break that pedestal that people put some of these manufacturers on, that they don't put their pants on one leg at the time, but they somehow jump into them and they're just on,
Yeah.
you know. I feel that that connection is made. It's a deeper connection, and so I appreciate you being willing to kind of talk about the family background here, and what I want to focus on going forward is kind of a little bit of the sales side of it, because you guys you started the company as tobacco growers and white label manufacturers, and then all of a sudden you produced your own stuff, and then all of a sudden you needed a sales team, and then you needed to pitch people on the fact that you've been around for 4 generations and you're not a new company, even though it's a new line of cigars. So what was it like for you in the beginning of pitching the one, the three, the five, as those being staples of the brand? How did you initially get retailers to even buy into it? Did you tell them your background, or did you go into it fresh and sell the cigars for what they were?
I we sold the cigars for what they were. I think it was something unique and different for the market at the time. And like I said earlier in the conversation, we were just at the right moment and the right time where the industry needed something. There was a huge decline, a lot of products. There was some really good brands, and there was some established name brands that were out there. But we were one of the first ones to really come with the whole boutique concept and the different multi-country blending. And I think it was so different at the time that it was something fresh to the retailer that was unique enough. We were very competitive in price. I always felt that, like I've said, you want to be able to give the consumer the, 100% for a reasonable price. And then that being said, it just really escalated from there really fast. It went from pitching the brand um, in the fall of 2000, because even though the brand was out, and we went to a trade show prior to that, we were still not very well known. And then a sales team was put together, and going from um, that December to pitching the brand to a sales team to organizing in a sales team, which we didn't have quite an understanding until then of what we needed to do, to going to over 1,200 stores within 6 months was very
Jesus.
impressive.
Gee,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
That's
So, but
very
yeah, it was huge. I mean, it was overnight, and it was really to the testament of the product itself and what needed. It was so different at the time. The experience of having options, uh, them telling you what the tobacco was made out of, where it was made, the quality of it. I mean, when we first came on board, a lot of people would go and pitch the cigar, and there was like, this is really heavy. It's a lot of tobacco. This is not going to draw. And we're like, we actually draw test every single cigar. We do everything possible to make sure, and we give more than what the cigars at the time, because I think we were also coming out of the cigar boom, post cigar boom, and people were still remembering new brands as really crappy cigars towards the end of 96, 97. It was just flood the market with product that people weren't really focusing on quality.
throwing shit at
And
a
then it
wall and
just,
seeing what sticks.
yeah, and that's what killed the cigar boom. Outside of the fact that it became unpopular, there was, but I mean, the cigar boom grew the industry, but then it came back down and it plateaued where it was before, better than it was before. But the quality of cigars that flooded to the market towards the end of it were really bad cigars, and that's what really kind of spelled the end of the cigar boom in the 90s. And then we've experienced a smaller one at the beginning of early 2000s, mid 2000s, and then the explosion of of boutique brands from '08, '10, 2010, and what became later on um, what we know now as the industry with boutiques.
So, and you had mentioned that you went from very unknown to all of a sudden 1,200 stores. You said,
Yeah, yeah, close to 1,200 stores within like
were you
between
ready for that? Like, or were you
we were
kind
able
of
to
like, holy
react.
shit,
Yeah,
I can't
we were
believe this?
no, we were just like, it was something new. It was a great experience. We didn't expect, I built systems in our company to make sure that we try to do what we could to supply the market, and the demand was so strong. We were ready, but by the second or third year, we've reached our limits, and the brand kept growing. So there was a little bit of that lagging to market kind of product where you were always on back order a little bit. So those are things that aren't expected, but it was to the success and the testament of the people that came on board and the team that we put together. That still to this day, there's quite a few number of those sales guys that are still with us.
Back order's not always a bad thing. A 1 week to 2 week back order actually helps the brand. In my opinion, a 4 week, a 2 month back order hurts the brand, right? There's that fine line of like, because when you when a cigar shop goes, dude, I can't fuck keep them in.
Yeah.
Like, I'm on a 2 week back order, so what you tell me what you want now, and I'll order you a box. That's a good thing. That's kind of a little bit of like, oh, I better get this now. It creates the urgency of, if it's in front of me, I should buy it.
Yeah.
So how did you kind of manage the back order? Because it was a new thing for you guys to be back ordered, because you'd done white label stuff. So what was your mentality? were you kind of like, holy shit, we're on back order? Like this is a good thing, or were you like, holy shit, we're on back order?
No, we were holy shit. We're on back order. We're losing sales. So that was my mentality then at the
What
time
kind of
because
time frame were you on for back order?
we went from back orders from at the time. And mind you, I mean, we still keep back orders, but it's because our demand is higher than our manufacturing. But that's by design at this point in time. And the
Correct.
reason I'll tell you that afterwards, it's not intentional to keep the brand from being hot or anything like that. It's on another level. I'll touch that in a second. But when we went from back orders to being um, about 2 years later, we went to back orders to being from like 2 weeks to like 4 months until we were getting product out. But then we would catch up and things were good depending on the time of the year. And then, like any growing business, capital was at the time
Of
a big
course.
issue. So that kind of hindered growth too, because you do have this demand, but you have this capability of manufacturing this much, and then the demand is higher. But even then, we never raise our prices. My whole goal, I didn't capitalize in a sense of like, well, if they're asking for more, we should raise our prices to be more aggressive, to capitalize on the lost sales. I didn't never wanted to do that. So we went for a period of time, and then we just focused on growing. But then at one point, I realized that we can't supply 5,000 we can't supply 5,000 stores as an example. That's not a number there, but we uh we decided that we were going to reach a limit of manufacturing of 5 million. That was my goal at one point in the early 2000s, and we're just going to focus on farming the quality, getting inventories for the following years, aging its back really well, and we're only going to make 5,600,000 a year. And that's what, and then we're not going to open up any new stores. We're just going to supply our partners at that point in time, who are the retailers, and we need to make sure that they have the product in order to um, supply to that demand. And that helped. But in the interim, in the late 2000s, a lot of boutique brands, a lot of new brands came on board. A lot of brands became very big. And then, like anything, you lose your shine a little bit, and then you lose a little bit of your market share, and people use this as I would have to say like a graduating cigar, where like they started with us and they moved on, and then it's kind of like it kind of plateaus, and you understand your market and your demand, and then we were able to fix and trend to that. But then my focus was like, well, we are here there with the brand, and then that's when I started to focus a lot more on the boutique side of like, okay, let's be competitive with the boutique, but let me show people what our blending capabilities are, and that's where a lot of the business side aspect of the boutiques came about. That we're gonna produce 5 million sticks of the core brand, but we're gonna also do a million of these other brands throughout the course of the year, and that's where we went.
So Bruce asks, do you have a sales force? It's not all just him, Bruce. I could say that, but how big is your sales force?
We are Our sales force right now is 9 to 11 people. I'm not counting right, but off the top of my head, it's between the different territories. Internally, we have independent brokers, and we have our own sales team. So we're about 9 to 11 people overall, including people in the office.
What's your
So
biggest state?
our biggest state, um, we sell quite a lot to across the country, but um, Texas is pretty big. California, of course, for number sticks is very big. It's probably the number one. But we
Really?
have, yeah. But there's a lot of emerging markets that, with COVID, people move around. The Southeast now is pretty big. For a long time, the Mid Atlantic, kind of North, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, they're still very strong. But like everything, the fluctuate people have moved, and The Mid Atlantic, the DMV that people call it, is really big for us too now. So, but strongest, I would have to say, for volume of sticks is California still to this day.
Now, as a business owner, I would piss me off, okay? Because I've always been told that if you remove the taxes on cigarettes, they'd still be about a $2 pack. Now they're around $15 to $20 a pack based on taxes. How much does it piss you off? And please be brutally honest here, because the government fucking sucks in every avenue. I don't care who's in it, what side of the field you play on. You're all a bunch of crooks, and that's my belief on it. How much does state taxes play into how you price? And what I mean by that is, take a state like California, something ridiculous like 80% sales tax.
No,
Or
California, New
New
York is
York's ridiculous.
75%. New York.
75%. So
Mm.
does state taxes at all play into how you price, or are you kind of like, it's out of my control? But part two to that question is, should the government be allowed to make literally the exact same thing you are off of these things? That's gotta irk you as a business owner that they got nothing invested, but they're making equal to you
Or more.
or more in some cases.
It all depends. I mean, if you look at it, look, I don't price my cigars based on tax for states. Um, it's never was the intended when we first released the brand. It was intended to have a price point for California, because it was so high in tax at that point in time, and that kind of launched us. But after that, I never focused on limiting my price or raising my price, because Texas there's like a penny tax.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania is similar in Florida. It wasn't that. It was just to ask for a fair price for what we do. Is the way I felt, and a reasonable margin for us to continue to grow our business. But do the states charge excessive tax? I do think it's a problem. I think the states that have a cap on their cigars are more successful, because they're losing revenue from different, because it does create like black market from other states, transshipping and all these things. And I think a lot of these states haven't really realized that with cigars, overpricing, it's just, people are going to find ways to limit the amount of tax revenue that they're going to have. So I think, it's unfortunate. It's bureaucracy and dollars revenue to the state in order to fund projects and things of that nature. It's unfortunate, but at the end of the day, I really wish that all the states for cigars, um, premium handmade cigars, would look into capping the tax at a reasonable, you know, 50 cents or 25 cents, whatever. Some states have them different. But those are actually more successful, and more lounges and more revenue comes to the state. I really always been against the fact that they do these high taxes, because they think it's a luxury item, and they tie it because
It's
we're
a
tobacco.
syntax. It's a
Yeah.
syntax.
Well, no, they people don't realize in these states that their sole goal is to tax cigarettes to death. So they think that if you overtax cigarettes, you're gonna stop people from smoking.
You're not.
And but then at the same time, we're tied into it, even though we're considered other tobacco product (OTP). We're still under the same percentage, and it doesn't really it's not fair. It's not fair to the consumer. I think it raises the cost of products excessively, and then the only ones that get hurt are the consumers, because unfortunately we do have to pass some of these costs along the retailers as well. So I'm one of those that like I said from the beginning, I don't like gouging people. I just want a fair price for what I do, and that's been my strategy, and I'll stay strong to that as long as I can.
And it's worked for you. And to your point, I'm from Illinois. Please, nobody fucking judge me on that, please. Okay, I moved out as quickly as possible. But in Illinois, the thing was to go and border jump to Indiana and buy cartons. So you're same thing. And so the people in Illinois, a lot of them went to Indiana Indiana got the tax revenue, Illinois didn't, but they're still smoking in Illinois, not paying Illinois prices. So who's really getting hurt here?
Yeah.
Is it the person buying the cigarettes that are still smoking, or is it the state with the non-tax revenue? So you're 100% correct in that.
I always felt that the states should look at where it's, if you want to look at it as revenue, you got to look at where it's going to defeat the growth of sales and revenue, because you got to look at it as a business. And I don't think people realize that government is a business to a degree with
Oh,
taxation.
it's the
Yeah.
business. It's the
Yeah. So,
business you
and
can't
there,
fight.
yeah, and the problem is, it's a tax that's kind of to fund projects that might be helpful for people. I'm not against taxes. What I'm against is excessive taxes that limits people, and there people are always going to find a way. And it makes, and I've always heard this saying, but it is true to a degree. It makes legitimate business owners into criminals
Yep,
or consumers, because people will find a way.
yep.
It's the norm.
I'm a firm believer you should not be able to tax an industry different than any other industry. A tax is a tax. If a tax is higher for one industry than the other, that is the government picking a winner or a loser in their own intra-state market. And when you have government taxing tobacco the way they do, it is a way for them to try to curtail people from using tobacco. But the reality of it is, oftentimes people will go with their cigarettes and without food because their cigarettes are more expensive. And that is just what it is.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm curious around how does Gran Habano fight this cause? What are you guys doing within either PCA or within court markets or supporting that to kind of make sure that your legacy doesn't go away, let alone the industry that we all love and don't want to go away.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think my strategy to this long-term approach has, what I've been preaching is like a reasonable price for a great product, maintaining a price down in order to make it accessible to consumers. We do great promotions to the retailers in order to make our product more accessible, more profitable to them, but at the same time, maintaining a price down. And then, in essence, I mean, look, for millennia, people have always been, we are essentially doing what the natives did thousands of years ago, and it's come around the fire. Now the fire is a little bit different, but at the end of the day, cigars bring people together.
Yeah.
And even though we're not smoking a pipe, we're smoking a cigar. It's still the same thing.
Equalizer.
Yeah, we this brings people together. It brings people from different paths of lives, from different social status, and it brings us all together. And it's something that, it's not addictive in my way of looking at it. Maybe you're addicted to the lifestyle as opposed to the product itself, because we are communal people at the end of the day,
Very
and
much.
that's why we go to. I You should always support your retailer
Yes.
100%, because these are the people that are keeping this industry alive at the retail level. In regards to us helping or supporting, I'm a huge proponent. I'm actually on the ballot. So if you're a retailer watching this tonight, go out and vote. Tomorrow's the last day to vote. If you haven't voted yet for PCA board members, I'm actually on the ballot, and I'm a huge proponent of working. I think they've done in the last few years a phenomenal job of working with the states, outreach, and explaining and fighting all these laws that are state by state taxation, all these things that are happening now, that essentially are going to inhibit us from doing what we love. And supporting your local retailer is actually your number one goal. I
Yep.
know that it's attractive to buy online and support everyone that you can, but believe it or not, your local retailer is a fabric of what we do. And if they're gone, everything will go away. And you'll be smoking cigars in your backyard by yourself. Would you rather be at a cigar store talking to someone about politics or sports, or it just brings everything together, and it's helping to feed someone else's family like it is mine's. And you know, it's tough. You'll find states that are tough to deal with, but hopefully in the long run they'll understand that this is not something that's going to go away. This is actually, tobacco is what helped to pay for funding the revolution.
It's the original fucking crop.
Yeah.
Like,
And if people understood that, I mean, you know, they'll understand that, you know, Virginia paid for a lot of the debt through
yeah.
tobacco. And so if you look at that and understand that, don't tax it to death. We're not like other products. Support us and help us to grow, because those people are going to help you and enrich your community and your state. And it's an industry that really needs to grow, and it will eventually grow, because it's not going to stop.
No,
So,
I'm a firm believer in that, and I'll take it a little step further in the sense that I will buy online, but I will not buy online from a place that is not a brick and mortar.
okay.
So
Actually,
that is where I draw the line. If you do not have a shop I can walk into, I will not support you, because I'm not here to support warehouses.
understandable. Look, everybody, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, depending on how you look at it, um, I think everything's reasonable. I think the problem is that somehow we've made the juncture where, and I don't have an Amazon account. I don't have a Prime account. I think I
Get out
order
of
from
here! You're
Amazon
get
one.
out of here! You're
I'm
joking.
not joking. I'm not joking.
I think I
I
met
don't.
the first fucking person in my life that doesn't have an
Telling you,
Amazon account.
I told you I don't. I think my wife has one, but she does not order. I don't have one. I don't support it. And the convenience factor, I get it. But we're losing a fabric of what makes us Americans.
Yes.
And ultimately, at the end of the day, is like you would go 50 or 100 years ago to go to your local butcher and talk to him about the cuts of meat, and he knew where the cow was from. The cigars are no different.
They're
You're going
not.
to be able to go talk to a retailer, and he's going to tell you my story and where the cigars are from. Because you might have gone to my factory on a trip one time, or another someone's factory, and really be on the field and understand what we're doing, how we're doing. And that person, um, you're losing that knowledge. You're ordering, but you're ordering from a screen that has a description of a product, but what is there to? So I'm not against also supporting online. I get it. I know that we're in a different world now, but at the end of the day, don't let the retailer go, because all you're going to be left with is 10 businesses in your shopping center that deliver to you regardless, and they're just there because whatever it is.
No,
You know,
I don't
they need so
disagree.
yeah. So
I don't disagree with you at all on that. Definitely support as much local as you can. We're a society now that we hit a button and we've got something tomorrow, and it's
yeah,
hard to. I don't have to get in my car, right? It's the epitome of lazy. I don't want to go like this with my foot until I get there, and then occasionally I go like this at red lights, you
yeah.
know.
Which
But
which I get, but the thing is, you're missing that human experience. The fact that you go to the store and you maybe are part of a conversation that you were just walking in to pick up cigars that could nurture, or you could learn from, or you could just bitch someone out. But
I
at the
yeah,
end of the day, it's part of what really makes us um, human. And if you're, I love your way of thinking. Like, you support someone that you could one day go and visit. That's kind of cool. I never really thought about that one.
you got
That's
to
a
have a
really
brick. You got to have a brick and mortar. I got to know you're supporting your family, your local community. I've
yeah.
got to know that if I'm ever in your area on business, I could stop in and go. I ordered from you.
That's
That to
cool.
me makes ordering cigars online from other shops other than local okay, because you're ordering local to them in a brick and mortar.
Yeah, yeah. That's
So
cool.
here in closing here, just a few questions here.
Sure.
Um, did you ever play with tobacco as a kid? maybe sneaking around the factory, maybe rolling something up. And did you ever sneak a cigar as a kid and get sick, like what was, because quite frankly, we all have snuck beer from my parents never drank, but I've snuck a lot of beer from my friends' parents' garages. So did that kind of ever happen with you, where it was like the forbidden fruit that you just played
No,
with?
no, honestly, it wasn't the case because it was so readily available that I guess it's kind of one of those things that since you know it, you don't. But I was always a kid that, and not a kid, but like I had friends that had access to cigars, but I honestly never had to sneak around
How old
because
were
I
you
guess,
when you were given your first cigar? Don't say
um,
18.
no, no. I think I smoked my first cigar when I was 15. Um,
Did you get
yeah.
sick?
No, no, I didn't get sick, but I didn't honestly, I didn't enjoy it because I didn't understand it. But believe it or not, when I was a kid, um, and I think I remember, and this sticks in my mind, because the cigars that we used to make in Colombia were a little bit different in quality, and they were. I remember I was 6 or 5, and I was walking behind someone smoking a cigar, and I was like, I would never do that. Back then. And it was just me in my mind. I never said it to anyone. And oh, I don't like that. That smells horrible. But then later on, I really kind of grew to appreciate it for what it was. But it was not anything that I was like, oh, I need to. It's forbidden fruit. So that was, I guess, that's the only difference for me. But yeah, I was 15 when I smoked the first one. I didn't dislike it, but I didn't enjoy it because I didn't know what I was doing. Then when I was like around 17, 18, I really was appreciating it a lot more because I was in the warehouse working, so why not try it?
if um if you had to meet anybody in history, just don't say Jesus or God or anything like that, but if you had to meet somebody in history, alive or dead, non-family, who would it be, and what Gran Habano would you bring?
Wow. So I would have to say that I would love to meet Napoleon. Um, I would love to ask him a whole bunch of questions of why he did certain decisions that he did. Um, I've always been a huge history buff, and I've always studied his battles. And you know, I would definitely like to ask him questions of why he did certain things, like why in Waterloo did he send the cavalry, even though it was raining and the whole thing, why he chose that particular uh, battlefield when he could have just gone, maybe retreated and looked for a better position for him. That being said, I would definitely take my blue and green.
That's
I
such a great cigar.
it's the cigar that I smoke
It's
probably
so
twice a
good.
day.
It's
I
so
love
good.
it.
It's so
It's
good.
it's really creamy. It's so flavorful, and I think he would appreciate
It's your
it.
jazz cigar. I mean, it really is a
It
fantastic
is.
cigar,
Thank you.
in every way. Have you ever thought about your grandfather's spirit hanging over the factory, going, "What the fuck are you making?" Like, we didn't use tobacco like that. You're blending it like that. Oh my god.
No, I would honestly would have to say that actually my nona's spirit,
Okay.
which is my grandmother. She worked at our factory until she could no longer in Honduras. When we moved over from Colombia to Honduras, she worked there until the end. And I definitely think at one point or another, her her spirit of what we were doing at the beginning when we were first starting out and then transitioning to where the factory was growing, really is still part of it. Um, and I think that's because she was, believe it or not, she was working a regular job like anybody else, stripping leaves, selecting wrapper, and that's what she loved. and it was kind of one of those things that's just interesting. So I think it there's a lot of generational um, spirit that's part of our brand that has transferred over. And I always take those things as the work ethic, the love, the passion, and the determination that comes into what we do. And that's my focus, continuing that. So it's always the love and passion for it.
2 questions left here. What is one tip you would give for a new cigar smoker?
Not to smell the cigar with the with the cellophane on it. But that's the one tip that's kind of a joke. But the reality is that don't be influenced by what you should be liking. Look for what you like, because not necessarily what you're expected to like as a new cigar smoker should be what you're going to enjoy. And I met a lot of people as like, oh, you got to start out mild. I met a lot of people that started out strong and there's gone on from there and gone to the extreme and then come back and realize that they like milder cigars. So at the end of the day, don't assume that you know everything. Don't assume that you should be expected to know everything. Ask a million questions. That's how you're going to learn. And the one person that's going to know what you like is only you. That's what I would say.
I totally agree with everything you just said. In fact, I had you used to have people when I would do cigar reviews go, "Oh, I don't get those tastes and flavors." And my response to them was not, "Well, why not?" It was, "Did you like the cigar?" And they go, "Well, yeah." And I said, "Then who the fuck cares what I tasted?
Yeah.
Like, it's your experience. You're paying for it. It's not mine. Like, we might have a similar profile, but I mean, I smoked, 3 to 5 cigars a day. My palate's pretty defined at this point. If you smoke one a month, you might not taste those flavors. Oh, we lost George. He's going to jump right back in here. It looks like his phone cut out here. No worries here. Let's go ahead and give him a quick second here to rejoin. And then we will bring him right back in. If not, not a worries. We are at the 2 hour mark, so we'll just go ahead and give him another couple seconds here. Looks like I know he was on his cell phone. Maybe his cell phone cut out. But either way we look at it, we'll go ahead and wrap up the show here. So, everybody, thank you so much for jumping in and joining us here in the Smokin' Studios for yet another live episode of the Rocky Mountain Cigar Show. This has been an episode in partnership with Gran Habano. If you have not had a Gran Habano, what the hell are you waiting for? Jump over to their website, look at their store locator, and support a local store to you. And until we see you again, smoke what you like, smoke as often as you can, and have a great, great rest of your week. Bye, everyone.